Many of my childhood memories are connected to the PlayStation 2 in some way. I was born in 2005 and my brother in 1994, but in Eastern Europe, due to economic reasons, everybody got the new consoles a lot later than in Japan or the USA, which meant that we only got a PS3 around 2012. Until then, we mostly played on the PlayStation 2 and on the Wii. But thanks to the PlayStation 2's huge library that consisted of 4,000 games, we didn't feel like we were left behind. That era had a certain vibe, its own rules, its own atmosphere. There was just something about the PS2 that makes it so interesting to this day. It's a lot more tangible, easier to recognize and a lot easier to describe than, for example, the 7 HD aesthetic of the PlayStation 3. A dark, sleek view on the future. Underground metros, train stations, airports, city skylines, and the heavy use of cool color schemes. The menus and the UI elements had the same context-sensitive design, often paired with a cyberpunk look. Very interesting and appealing visuals. The digital apocalypse, Sophistication future, Gen X soft club. There are many names for this, but all of these aesthetics express one main idea: that with technology advancing at this speed, we are going to become one with the machine. It gave the feeling that we weren't just using technology anymore, we were being observed by it. And that idea, losing yourself to the machine, defined the mood of the 2000s. During this time, gaming was evolving faster than it ever had before, or after. It defined and perfected gaming alongside passion and creativity with almost every single title. All sorts of games were released in this era, and developers were very open to trying new things. Every game felt fresh and new, and development times were a lot shorter compared to nowadays. Look at Leon in Resident Evil 2 and compare him to his Resident Evil 4 counterpart. Or look at Kazuya from Tekken 2's pre-rendered cutscene and compare that to Tekken 4. Compare the cutscenes from Final Fantasy 7 and the cutscenes from Final Fantasy 10.
You are sure? This is it. This is your story. It all begins here.
There is just something about the PS2. You can see it in the games released on the console. You can feel it when you enter a save room in Resident Evil 4, and soft music plays while it's raining outside, and the windows in the game get lit up every time lightning strikes. You can see it in the pre-rendered cutscenes of the Tekken games, from the way Steve smirks at the camera in a smug way after knocking someone out. The PS1 era was very short and brief. The console was released in 1994, and only 6 years later the PS2 came out. As the PS1 era came to a close, gaming experienced a sudden burst in popularity. As the medium grew, so did the companies, the budgets, and most importantly, the games. Marking the 6th generation of video games, and if you ask me, especially the PlayStation 2 as the first modern era in gaming. Regardless of your opinion, the PS2 was the main star of the 6th generation in terms of both quality and quantity of games. It's still the highest selling console of all time. When looking back at the PlayStation 2, there is a noticeable difference compared to the ones that came both before and after. Let's break down the core traits of the PlayStation 2 aesthetic. PS2 graphics are just high fidelity enough to go beyond the uncanny valley, be genuinely realistic while not losing any style, and still being able to have art direction. Do we really need games to look better than this? There is no spaghetti hair anymore. Hair looks, feels, and acts like real hair, but with a little bit of perfection. One could even say that it looks a little better than real life. And this was the first generation that had materials that looked like their real-life counterparts, despite the fact that there was absolutely no material-based rendering yet. But the console still had beautifully reflective marble, polished, shiny wood, and reflective, rainy sheep floors. Still, everything was quite low poly. The GameCube version of Leon Kennedy from Resident Evil 4 was 10,000 polygons, while the PS2 version was literally half as much. This is why recreating PS2 graphics is hard, because they require a level of artistry and skill that takes a lot of time to master. For example, the pockets on Leon's coat are just a texture without any real geometry. What matters is how you use those polygons. Look at Silent Hill 3. Heather in the game has around 6,000 polygons. The characters from Tekken Tag Tournament were actually higher polygon than the characters from Tekken 4 or 5. This is what skill is. The artists improved their 3D modeling abilities in the span of just 2 games, and were able to make far better looking models with fewer polygons. Nowadays, this is unheard of, but it proves that more polygons don't mean better graphics. Even now, the best looking game of all time is still Uncharted 4 or Red Dead Redemption 2, which are almost 10-year-old games. Nobody pays attention to lighting as much as they did in the PS2 era. Nowadays developers just turn on shadow mapping and call it a day, but back then lighting was baked in and every light source was placed with an intent, to create a certain mood. Developers had limitations, and those limitations forced them to think about what they were doing. Now you can place down as many light sources as you want, and they can all be real time. But if you don't think about it, your game will literally look worse than a 20-year-old title. Just look at Gran Turismo 4. Most PS2 games weren't fully open world yet, but despite that you could get glimpses of how the worlds would feel to explore. Kamurocho in Yakuza or even Shinjuku in Tekken 4 was detailed enough to give you an idea of how the whole city might have felt. There is a reason why the PS2's CPU was called the Emotion Engine. And how could I make a video about the PlayStation 2 without talking about GTA San Andreas? The 3D era GTA games are the perfect examples of how to make a small open world feel huge. The map of San Andreas is basically one big liminal space, but thanks to amazing direction, it feels cozy and comfortable. The aesthetics of this game are top-notch. The lighting changes based on what city the player is currently in, but still, almost everyone associates San Andreas with orange. That warm, hazy orange glow. It's calming and welcoming, like a cozy blanket that warms you up. It's objectively very unique and stylish, the same way Blade Runner is remembered for its blue neon look, San Andreas is remembered for range. It gives the game a visual identity and a strong emotional connection. Now compare this to bland, modern AAA games. It's insane how nobody does this anymore. Despite the fact that geometry is super simple and that there is almost no clutter on the sidewalks, no benches, no trash cans, it still feels alive. GTA 5's map is roughly 3.5 times bigger, but San Andreas just feels bigger. It has more cities, more character models, more things to do. In GTA 5, many streets look the same and connect in strange, repetitive ways, while San Andreas is just easier to navigate. Its map is efficient, purposeful. All of those games were going for realism, but there was always a playful, almost 90s anime-like touch added to it that made everything look timeless, creating a level of nostalgia that made it feel like video game graphics were at their peak. This was also reflected in the game stories. The video game industry had finally started to grow up. The games were finally a lot more serious. They tackled themes like depression, murder, loneliness, politics, crime. But despite this, they didn't sacrifice fun. They didn't sacrifice their gaminess at all. They were very playful. And nothing captures this tone more than Metal Gear Solid 2. MGS2 is one of my favorite games of all time, alongside Skyrim and Final Fantasy VII. I would like to create games like this one. And the game's vibe is one of the reasons for this. It's a game that changes things for you. A game with purpose, with intent. Not only in its message, but also in its gameplay and design. The original trailer of MGS2 showcased this perfectly. Guards could notice your shadows, you could shoot out lights and even bags, and if the bags got shot, they would spill their contents all over the game's map, causing enemies to stumble if they walked on it. You could even shoot the cloth on a box, which would cause the wind to blow it onto the closest lamp, causing worse visibility. These are things you can't do in most modern games, yet the game in 2001 was already doing it. PS2 games were finally detailed enough to get lost in, but not too detailed like modern games. The details didn't take away from the actual game, they enhanced it. Nowadays developers focus on pointless things that are interesting to watch for a few minutes in YouTube videos like 50 hidden details in Red Dead Redemption 2, but actually nobody really interacts with them themselves. The PS2 was the exact opposite of this. The players interacted with the details. For example, in MGS3, if you blew up the small buildings where rations and weapons were stored, the enemies in later stages would be hungry and lack weapons and ammunition. And the style is also very important. Another one of my favorite examples is Tekken 4, the best Tekken ever made and my favorite fighting game. Tekken 4 takes on the hype of technology in the new millennium with high sophistication. It's intelligent and highly evolved. The game's whole identity is so futuristic to this day. But a believable kind of futurism. The rapid rhythm of drum and bass music is like an auditory representation of the future. The music on the airport map doesn't represent the interconnecting global community or the engineering of airplanes. It represents what one would feel after drinking a cup of coffee at one of Manhattan's airport restaurants, and then boarding a flight for a business trip in the early 2000s. Almost smug in how sophisticated it is. I want to be there, in a suit, boarding a plane to go to a business meeting from New York to LA in Ray-Ban sunglasses. With enough money and class to not to worry about anything. But you can clearly feel this vibe in the OS of the PS2 as well. After you boot up the console, you are greeted by this otherworldly, earth-shattering piano sound that feels like it comes from outer space, as you are being dragged down past the white pillars into the darkness. Each of those pillars represent runtime on each save file you have on your PlayStation 2. Having only a couple of files will create an intro like this, but having a memory card full of saves will create this. It It leads to a menu with a ring of lights in the middle, and each button press creates an atmospheric sound. Ocean waves that sounds like you are down at the depths of an ocean. It just feels like perfection. You don't need a lot in order to create this unique menu. The unique save icons were a perfect example of the soul of the PlayStation 2. Every game had its own save icon that could even change depending on what menu choice you were in. For example, in some games, if you try to delete the save data, the character in that icon would start crying. In others, the save icon was just a simple cube with the game's title. But no matter what, it always felt unique and interesting. In Japan, the fat version of the PlayStation 2 actually got a completely new dashboard that was far more functional than what everyone else had. But the homebrew community translated it to English and made it possible to use for everyone. If you have installed this, you won't have your typical opening to the PlayStation 2. You will have this instead. This is the PlayStation BB menu. Very stylish. You could explore the channels similar to the Wii. You have the game channel, music channel, photo channel and the movie channel. If you go inside the game channel, you have several companies that were big in the early 2000s, and if you go to any one of these, you will basically see an interactive catalog. You could download promotional materials like screenshots and trailers and save them on your PS2. But you could also send email with it. No other console or even video game represents itself quite this way. That's what we are trying to bring back at Wushin software.